Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that it is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the easiest way to create a beautiful website, blog, or online store for you and all the amazing ideas that you have in your head. Squarespace features an elegant interface, beautiful templates, and incredible 24/7 customer support. You should try Squarespace at squarespace.com. You enter the code WORDS, WORDS, at checkout. You get 10% off, and it helps support the show. Squarespace, build it beautiful. Now, on with today's show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins, ever present to bring you, the listener, some interesting and insightful dialogue around independent music in the form of an interview. You know, sometimes I like to remind people that might not listen to every episode what this show is all about. I try to get to the core of who these people are that have dedicated their lives to either creating music, putting out music, or just being creative. Because after all, that's kind of what everybody has, that itch inside of them. They got to get out somehow. And I just happen to focus on music and how much it's changed my life and all the people I bring on the show. So anyways, the guest this week is Fred Feldman from Triple Crown Records. You know, a little record label that has released some amazing stuff from, brand new and so many other things. I'll let him do most of the pimping and talking in regards to what he has put out. But this is a special month, all of July. I know some of you who follow the show religiously enjoy these months when I cluster up guests that are all kind of under one specific discipline. So this is record label month. And this is very near and dear to my heart because I've worked at a lot of record labels over the years of me being involved in independent music. And I've had a lot of friends run record labels. And I was like, you know what? This seems to be an appropriate thing. I get a lot of requests for people being like, hey, why'd you interview this guy who does this label? Or how about you interview this girl who does this record label? And I was like, you know what? Let's just run through it, make it all a month, and make it a thing. So that's what we're in right now. July is record label month. You will have 5 weeks full of content from labels that are currently active, labels that may be active in other countries, or labels that are defunct, but were incredibly important to our music scene as a whole. So anyways, that's my pitch. Hopefully you like it. And if you don't, well then just don't listen to these episodes, or just don't listen to my show. You know, that's your choice. It's free. So got to speak about this first, and then we'll talk about Fred and go into the interview. So I went to Warp Tour recently. And for those of you that are not familiar, it is a music festival that takes place every summer, run by a fine gentleman named Kevin Lyman and his crew of awesome people. And this year I was incredibly excited for multiple reasons. I was very busy that day, had a lot of work to do from my day job perspective, from the record labels I help perspective, and there's just a lot of stuff going on. And while it was incredibly draining, incredibly hot, it was still super fun. I was able to see only a few bands, but I plan on going to the festival again in August when it comes through Southern California again. Plan to make a drive down to San Diego and hang out with some friends. But you have to think that, it's a thankless job, like what Kevin and his crew do, because, bands are appreciative and there are positive benefits for it, especially from a financial standpoint as well. But I just often think about the work that I personally did in a music festival for a few years. And then I reflect on how much stress it takes for Kevin and his team to pull all this together. And, a simple thank you. That's all I'm really saying. It's an incredible job that they do. And anytime I'm able to be in the orbit of what it is that they do, I'm just always continually impressed. Because, at the end of the day, Kevin doesn't need to do it year after year, but he cares. He really, really cares. And it's awesome to see that. It's easy to see when you look at the tour because it evolves. It's changed over the years. Different bands play. He takes risks on artists that don't particularly make sense in the context of Warped Tour. And I don't know, there's just a lot of respect I have for what they're doing. So just want to make sure that you're aware of that as well. And if you don't live in this country, hopefully you get a chance to at least experience Warped Tour in some capacity, whether you're traveling or making a trip to the United States or you see it in the United Kingdom, whatever. As long as you have a general awareness of it, It's awesome. It's a great thing. And one of these days I'll have Kevin on the show. I promise. A lot of people have asked for him as a guest, but I digress. Here's Fred. Fred Feldman has a long history within the context of the music industry. I've known him for a while, just specifically with the Triple Crown stuff, but I was really interested in his life before that because he helped build a record label that was very influential from the sort of, Warped Tour music scene, but then also it has expanded even farther past that with Triple Crown. And then he has a history even before that within independent music as well. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's pretty incredible. He was a little reluctant. I was emailing with him to be like, hey, would you be interested in appearing on the podcast? And he's like, I don't know. I generally don't do these things. But then Fred was like, you know what? I want to do this. This should be fun. So here's our conversation, and I will talk to you at the very end of the show. Enjoy. I remember when when I first started to work at Century Media when I was, 21, 22 years old. It was one of those things like watching or looking at Triple Crown and seeing what you guys were doing, essentially kind of late 90s, early 2000s, where it was like, your roster made no sense whatsoever. Like, and this is as far as like, oh yeah, this was the same label that put out, 25 to Life and Folly. And then they also put out Hot Rod Circuit. Like I'm sure people that obviously do some research look back at the label and are just like, Fred, what is all this stuff, dude? Was that out of a function of just like your own personal taste, or was that just like you tried to definitively showcase the fact you can't pigeonhole the label?
I think it was definitely not wanting to be pigeonholed. Some of it definitely is music. It's an extension of my taste, which is extremely eclectic. And it's having an eclectic mix of music is a double-edged sword. You're never going to get kids who are just like so committed to the label sound and they're just going to take chances. But I think it also allows you to take chances. So, and go sign things that you find intriguing. And that's really why we did it the way we did it.
I definitely can understand where you're coming from, where it's like, it's easier to, kind of have a blank canvas to, obviously, like at this point, you can sign any band from basically any genre of independent music and people will be like, oh, okay. It may not make sense next to this band, but like, I get it. Like he just likes this and he wants to put this out.
Yeah. And if you go back to the beginning to 97, it's like our first two records, it was 25 to Life and the Stubborn All-Stars, which was like a traditional ska record. It wasn't a ska punk record. It was very traditional ska. And, that kind of set the tone for the lunacy, I think.
Right.
Totally different audiences, totally different sonically, couldn't be farther apart. But I think the brand was they were both just hardworking bands who had an audience that we felt we can build on.
I have to ask, just out of curiosity's sake, was dealing with Rick to Life as entertaining as I would imagine it would be?
Yes. Rick was great. The reason Rick signed with me is because I was at I used to be at Profile Records, and I ran Profile Records for years, and they had, when I was going to leave there, the owner said, I went to Profile way back in the day because of Rock Hotel, the first wave of like the success of hardcore, Cro-Mags, Murphy's Law, Leeway, and he said, you can start a label, run Profile. And so I also, was lucky enough to kind of make some mistakes on someone else's dollar, just to be honest.
Yep.
And when Profile was sold, that label was being shut down. But I had been talking to Rick before about signing him to, it was called Another Planet. So I went to Rick and I said, hey, I'm going to start my own label. Any chance you want to sign with me? And Rick was like, sure.
Right.
Because Rick being Rick was like, yeah, okay. And then that's when we made the Strength Unity. And Rick was, it was surprisingly hassle-free. And entertaining. and just sometimes just in the most bizarre situations that just like, wow, Rick, really?
Right.
Going to rent a van for him was amazing, and I do have a lot of Rick stories that and all of them always put a smile on my face for the most part.
Right. Well, yeah. Anybody that obviously has any historical context for hardcore in general, it's like there's no way that you can't have lived through the '90s and not have a Rick to life story, because that's just who he was. He touched everybody in a good or bad way, and that's fine.
Exactly. And I don't know if like kids into hardcore now really kind of understand that who Rick really was, and the guy was a hard worker. I mean, for everything maybe said, whatever it is, everybody's had different situations, but that guy worked hard.
Oh, absolutely.
So it was amusing, and we put out some Come and Correct records. I think Strength Through Unity is really just a fantastic. That EP is great, and I thought it set the tone. And I really was hoping, Friendship, Loyalty, Commitment was good and has its moments, but I don't think it stands up to the EP.
So we'll get to your history in the music industry in a little bit, but I want to back up even further. So you strike me as a born and raised East Coast dude. Am I correct in that assumption?
That is correct.
Okay. Always in the New York area?
Yes.
Okay. Like where in particular?
I was born in Brooklyn, before way back when, and grew up on Long Island, kind of before that whole like real scene exploded. And then back into New York, and still out in this area. Actually, back on the island wasn't my plan, but families, kids, all that stuff. So yeah, when we started the label, we were based in Manhattan, and we're just outside of Manhattan now. And
yeah. Would you ever entertain the idea of moving to like California or anything like that? I mean, maybe not at this point, but through your duration of working or just living, because there seems to be a distinct like, oh, I could never live in California. No way. Like, do you have that attitude?
I am one of those people.
Okay.
The opportunity has presented itself for the family and whatnot, and it wasn't something I think I think she would have gone, but not me.
Right. Yeah, you'd be like, yeah, you could move out there. I'm not.
Yeah, and that wasn't going to happen.
Of course.
It's been okay.
Yes. And then, so what was your, what were your parents into as far as like, what were their jobs? Like, what was your family structure like as you were growing up? Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah. I mean, stable household, nothing in the entertainment business, garment center family, very traditional upbringing, one sister, nothing out of the ordinary.
Sure.
Just me as a lunatic metalhead. I was the black sheep.
Sure. So that you dove in headfirst to the I presume kind of the 80s metal scene, as it were.
Very much so. Very into metal, and then somebody played. I forgot. I think it was NYU where Jack Rabbit had his show. What was the name of it? I can't remember. It was Thursday nights, and I went to high school with Lyle Eisen, who was the drummer in Das Damen, and he played in a hardcore group. It was my two introductions to hardcore came from Lyle, who was in a group called The Misguided, and then Danny and Paul were in Heart Attack, Jesse Malin's group.
Right.
And they took me to shows that I was like, my first show was like Mob and Heart Attack. That's how far back I go. Right. And I was kind of like, oh, what is this? This is wild. And that kind of opened up that door from, loving metal to looking for something harder, finding the Bad Brains, finding Agnostic Front and that stuff.
Like you said, you were the kind of the black sheep. Were your parents pretty terrified of the aesthetic and the look and the music that you were kind of bringing home, and they just didn't know what to do with you?
Yeah, for the most part, I think they kind of just were like, he'll grow out of it. And I definitely did, but I think that they just always had music was like really important to me, and played around in high school in bands and whatnot, terrible bands, terrible metal cover bands and stuff, and knew I didn't have the talent for it whatsoever. I think that they definitely allowed that passion to kind of grow.
Sure. So when you mentioned that you played in bands, that was actually a question I was going to ask, because usually the whatever the saying, those who can't teach or whatever, and I equate that to, releasing music or whatever. So what instrument did you find that you did not have the proclivity to continue your band career at?
Oh, guitar. Just terrible. I mean, can play a chord, can play chords, can still play a couple of those songs, but, just it was not. I mean, this is also kind of the early stages of like hall shows and all those. I mean, who knows what would have happened if, there wasn't the kid promoters putting on the show at the VFW hall when I kind of was into this stuff. It was definitely more arena rock. Mm-hmm. The CBs, the Seven, the stuff in the Lower East Side was just starting in the city.
Right. So it wasn't accessible for you to be able to be like, oh yeah, let's put on our own show, because that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it wasn't like when I got back in college where, the PWAC was going on Long Island and things like that.
Right.
Deja One show, all that whole scene.
Sure. Yeah, ABC No Rio and all that stuff starting to blossom. And so then as you were going through high school, did you apply yourself, Fred? Were you a good student? Did you kind of care about the that aspect, or were you more interested in the social aspect of hanging out?
Definitely not a passable student. Let's just put it like that. The effort was minimal. I see it in my kids now. I'm like, you apply yourself, you'll do much better. So, there was moments of like, oh shit, I gotta really do this. And then there was moments of like, show up, get the, pass, and that's enough.
Right. I do find a common thread, especially people that, get consumed by independent music like you and I do, where it's like, you kind of try to find the level of acceptability with your parents, where it's like, okay, they get really bummed if I get a C, but what if I get a B minus? Like, is that okay? Like, what can I bring home that won't get them mad at me?
Exactly. That's exactly it. And it was, it was good. And it's funny because you didn't have the distractions that there are now with, the internet and every social media and all this stuff at your fingertips. It was probably just pure laziness.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I think that it also has to do with kind of the restlessness as well, where it's like you want to focus your energy on something, but like you just can't really find that thing.
Definitely, mind distracted, definitely thinking of other things, but, managed to graduate, get into a a good school, and kind of find my way.
Sure. Yes. As you started to go through school and like went to college, what were you trying to study, or what was your focal point? Was it like, hey, I want to do something with music, or were you kind of taking a different path and then you got pulled into it?
I think I wanted to be around music on some level. Realizing the business side was intriguing. I think it's more of an opportunity of like, you can make your mark even in high school, where you can create something, whether you're that local promoter who's willing to take a chance, putting a record out by friends of yours you feel passionate about. There was those things. My kind of entree into that world when I was in high school was I was a photographer. And, this is the days of like the Xerox fanzines and stuff like that. This wasn't like I'm shooting for my blog.
Right.
So shot for a bunch of stuff and got into some kind of interesting fanzines that were impactful, whether it was like Damaged Goods in the East Coast or like, Brian Slagle owns Metal Blade had a fanzine, about metal stuff, and I was shooting like British bands that were coming over that I was passionate about, and realized like, wow, this is interesting. I'm doing something in the business, even though I kind of have no right to do this. So when I got to college, I was started to, not necessarily from the classroom side, but from there is opportunities here to learn the business side, whether it was the college radio station, working with the concert board, things like that.
Right.
And as school progressed, got more involved in it and realizes like I was running the concert board at Syracuse. Like, I'm running a business here. So there is something here, and, but I'm still a student. Mm-hmm. So it was trying to find that balance.
Sure. So is that where you went to school, Syracuse University?
Indeed, I am an Orange.
You are an Orangeman through and through.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think it's an important point you hit on there, where it's like a lot of the times you don't even realize you're doing something that is kind of giving you the quote unquote training or life skills or whatever you want to call it, because you're just trying to participate, like you're building something, whether you're even cognizant of it or not.
Yeah, exactly. And you're getting experience. You're having fun, and you kind of one day you realize, like, I'm getting some real experience here, real life experience. I mean, I think that was the best thing. I think there's two ways to view college. You can go, and if you're going into something with a higher calling, whether it's, lawyer, doctor, something like that, scientist, yeah, the academics are very important. Otherwise, it's the experience. And, can you go someplace that's kind of a microcosm of the world and try to get some real life experience, but still be sheltered? Or you just go right into the workforce and just figure it out.
Right. Yeah, no, it's an important point. Yeah, I never thought about it from like the academics versus experience, because that's the whole whatever nature nurture argument. It's that same idea over and over. Mm-hmm. And so just because you were kind of on the ground floor, as it were, obviously, as the New York City scene started to take place and manifest itself, everyone obviously always speaks about the violence and the craziness and stuff like that. Was that your experience as well? Did you notice that, or was it just kind of like, oh, there were some isolated fights or whatever, but you didn't get consumed by that? Because you don't strike me as a violent guy, but
not at the least.
Okay. So, but did you notice that, or was there an air of I guess, for lack of a better term, danger around there, or was it just kind of like, oh, I guess this is weird?
Yeah, I definitely think that, because I kind of got introduced to it in the mid '80s, and I went away to school, and I kind of came back, and it was the early '90s. So I think in the beginning it was ignorance is bliss. You definitely saw violence, but I never felt it. I mean, at that time, going down to CB's was like, that shit was crazy in its own right. Yeah. Like, when I go to a show at Palladium on 14th Street, that was crazy. So I think, it's youth. It's like, I never was bored. I mean, I never was fully immersed in the scene and spending all my time there. I'd just go to shows. And then when I kind of started working at Profile, and, the Chrome makes the reputation precede them, and you spend time with them, like, John's a good guy. Harley's scary, but he's an all right guy. So, and Jimmy, the reputations preceded him, but once you knew him, you're like, these are good guys. You show them respect and fine.
No, totally. Yeah, meeting all those people in the course of business and professional dealings as well. Like, when I was working with Sick of It All at Century Media, it's one of those things where it's like, here, whatever, here's me, 22, 23 years old, and it's like, I even though Sick of It All, isn't notoriously violent, I was just like, they're coming from a whole different scene than I am. And like, you have those expectations, and then you talk to them, and you're just like, oh, they're just dudes. Like, that's all they are.
Exactly.
Like, yeah. And so as you came back to New York City, did you have was there a job waiting for you there? Was there something that you were kind of like angling to get into?
I got to be honest. Graduated, couldn't figure out. I'm like, what do I do? Because I didn't take the route of internships over the summers because I needed to work to get some money for school. So I never had that route of like every summer I was interning somewhere. Kept beating the pavement, talked to anybody who would talk to me, friends of friends, friends of family. And I got to the point where I started calling a couple companies where I had a slight entree and saying, I'll work for free, just give me opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so that's when Profile, like, they allowed me to work for free in the mailroom. And that or Tower Records, after like commit to closing every day, and did that. But at some point they put me on salary, and started in the mailroom and literally worked my way up.
Got it. Yeah, you did the whole pay your dues, sweat equity thing of figuring out how things work from, like you said, the ground up.
Exactly. And again, I hip hop was kind of just started exploding. Profile was one of the biggest indie labels out there. This is after Run DMC. This is before Tougher Than Leather. And I just really liked that Rock Hotel stuff. Chris Williamson was like a character, and nobody cared there. And I was like, I care. So, and there was always at odds between Profile and Rock Hotel, even though Profile owned it. So my grand idea was like, I'm going to be the guy that's going to make this right. I'm going to be the guy that gives a shit, and that's going to be my stamp on this thing. And it was sort of unfixable, but the bands knew they had an ally in there, and it was like music business horror stories for those guys. Like, they definitely didn't get a fair shake. I mean, those records did very well, but, I felt bad for them. It was certainly I think it set the tone for kind of how I run my company, how to treat artists, and, but it was good experience and, ended up more on the rap side for years.
I think that's a really important point and fact about your life is the fact that it's like, because a lot of people, I mean, especially whatever, if you look at obviously hip hop and R&B these days, it's like, you couldn't be more different than what it was obviously in the, early 90s, to where it was, there's, a distinct edge to it. You could obviously still find that, but I just think the sort of, well-roundedness of a person in regards to their, not only, like you said, your own diverse music tastes, but the fact that you're willing to kind of, roll your sleeves up and be like, well, yeah, like I'm not, I wasn't initially immersed in the hip hop world, but now I there's enough comparisons where I could see where it's like, well, yeah, music is music, regardless of who's creating it and what it sounds like. I'm still passionate about it.
Exactly. I mean, I remember someone telling me when I was looking for a job, he's like, listen, I'm going to give you the best advice anybody's going to give you. And I'm like, really? And he said, go to Nashville. He's like, Nashville is the breaking easier. You'll have a career. And that step I couldn't do. I was like, I thought about it. And I was like, I can't do it.
Right.
And I'm glad I didn't, but to that point, I was purely a country.
Yeah, no, totally. You were not getting any sort of alt country tip to that. It's just pure country. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so you mentioned, I think it's interesting, the fact that you were able to kind of, see how there was that sort of, gold rush of, hip hop in the early 90s when things just started to crack and obviously artists were signed to deals that, weren't necessarily beneficial to them in the long run. Like, yeah, they may have got a large advance, but that's it. Like they weren't going to see anything else in the back end. So did you have that notion of kind of, oh, the music industry is this evil thing and trying to exploit artists beforehand? And then it was kind of confirmed with that? Or were you kind of like, I guess ignorant to that fact, and then you saw it and it was like, oh, wow, like this doesn't seem, I guess, quote unquote, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was learning on the job. Let's just put it like that. I didn't necessarily love the idea of like these artists, sign with you to take that journey with you, and then you kind of don't talk to them. You don't pay royalties on time, that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that happened. I'm just saying I've seen it. So,
right.
It was definitely, to me, I think that the communication was one of the things that bothered me most, that you just won't talk to this person.
Oh, interesting.
And give, about the career and stuff. And granted, it cuts both ways. I mean, there are, and I'm sure you've seen this over the years too, artists sometimes are very unrealistic. And, what I've found, like when they're screaming about something, it's like, this isn't happening and this isn't happening. And when everybody catches their breath, you're like, what would you do differently? And usually, sometimes they don't even have that answer, because everyone's judging themselves on what the other guys are.
Totally. No,
so,
the thing that I've always said is very similar to your point. Most of what the business of entertainment as a whole is just managing expectations. It's as long as you and the party that you are working with understands the kind of common goal and the steps that are in front of you to be able to take those and then hopefully get to that point. As long as those steps are mutually agreed upon, and of course they'll divert and move around, but that's when, like you said, it kind of gets off the rails and the communication breaks down when two parties start to work together and one person is like, oh yeah, well, I'm this band, and you're like, well, I didn't sign you because you were this band. I signed you because you were this band or whatever. So it's, managing expectations. That's a very good point.
Exactly. So, you saw a lot of stuff, and not just Profile, just in the business side in general. It was an interesting time for indie labels at that time, and it was a lot of success for some of the companies, and most of them got gobbled up by majors. But it was a good learning experience. Got, experience in everything from working pop radio to MTV when MTV played music videos to, touring to urban radio, manufacturing sales. And so I think that was the best thing about being, and it's why I like independent companies, because it's not like they're big companies where you have a department. You stay in your lane, and at an indie, especially ones that are doing okay or successful, you kind of have your hands in everything. And that's the best way to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great point. I think that's the only way that you truly can understand the business as a whole. It's like, yeah, you could have maybe like, okay, I don't know about college radio, or I don't know about, this one aspect of it, but it's like, well, everything else I've touched. And that's so important, because then, yeah, if you ultimately want to like shift gears and do something else within the industry, where do you start? You're like, well, I guess I'll intern. It's like, what? No, you're far enough along to where you shouldn't have to be doing that anymore.
Exactly.
So with the, how long were you at Profile for?
I think I was there 12, 13 years, something like that. A long time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a long run, especially with the, even though the music industry was obviously much different than what it is right now, people tended to still lose their jobs and have a high rate of turnover. Did you just seem to have kind of a good relationship with management, and people kind of generally trusted you?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of that. I think it was every time I got an offer to go somewhere else or was entertaining it, they would, give me new responsibilities. And I thought that getting a better position, a successful company, was better than taking a step sideways in a big company. That really was it. Every time I was going to go somewhere, they'd kind of say, "Well, do this," because they it was a small staff, and they want to know the people and trust the people in charge. And I think that was really it. It's just opportunities kept coming.
Yeah, no, that's cool, and especially with the fact that you obviously. There's something to be said about loyalty, because obviously you see so many people, jumping to working at different labels, and, that's a positive thing, hopefully, for them. But then there is something to be said about, yeah, as long as you keep, respecting me and you keep giving me cool things to work on, then why would I really change that?
Yeah, and I like the music. I definitely, it was just good opportunity. I never saw myself as, forget about major label versus indie. I just thought those big systems was never like going to suit my personality. So that really, like, when I would get the opportunity to do something more, I kind of just said, you know what, this is better. In the long run, this is better. Never really thinking like one day I'll start my own company, but that was really it,
Yeah. Well, I think it's something interesting you mentioned there, where you were able to, I guess, match your own personality or work ethic or whatever you'd like to call it with the fact that you knew you couldn't work within certain systems. Was that just based off of like observations, or was that based on the fact that you were like, oh no, like, I'm pretty stubborn. I don't need these. I can handle one or two people telling me what to do, but I can't handle like 7 people telling me what to do.
Yeah, I think it was more observations. I think it was the idea that, like, like you said, with the major labels, there's constant, changes. There'd be a new president, white guy, everybody bring his team in and stuff like that. And I was like, you're not going to have that here. So, who knows? You never know. There were some interesting opportunities that were presented, but I kind of still like the people. I like the music. I like the challenge of it. And, I think anybody, doesn't matter, like when Hopeless had that #1 record with All Time Low, nothing makes me happier than an indie label kind of winning like that. So I think even, and Pro was having some serious successful records, gold and platinum acts, and we were totally part of it. Everybody. You weren't like 77th down the line to make this happen. So I like that.
Yeah. It was all hands on deck.
Mm-hmm.
And so did you, obviously, as you started to develop, I guess, seniority over there and started to, have a cachet or clout, were you trying to, like you said, you came to Profile and you were like, hey, I would like to really, heavy music is something I'm passionate about, and here's some ideas. So when did that kind of come into play?
Profile was sold to Arista Records. Actually, no, I got to take a step back. There was 2 owners of Profile, and they split up. It was a nasty kind of split, and I was going to leave and go to another indie label. And the owner, who was basically staying on, said to me, hey, please stay. You're going to be the GM. You're going to run the place, and you can start. If you want to start a rock label, be my guest. Just your focus is this. So I was like, holy shit, that's an amazing opportunity. So we started Another Planet. We reissued like all the Murphy's Law Chrome magazine. We did that double CD thing with the book, and it were beautiful packages. And went on to sign some weird shit. That's when we did the first Stubborn All Stars record. But like, I did an American Standard record, not even understanding what am I doing. But that was a great record. Piss and Vinegar is a really good rock record. I re-signed Murphy's Law. We had a nice run with that, and a whole bunch of other stuff, weird records. Just finding my way. So, and in the same time, overlooking a Run DMC project, a DJ Quick, all these, like, we were big on the West Coast at that point, West Coast rap.
Right. Well, I mean, you also have a hand in, I think, a comp that single-handedly changed my life, the Antimatter compilation, because that was on Another Planet, correct?
That's right, Norm. I love that zine, and I just tracked Norm down. I said, we should release a record to go along with this. And Norm was like, okay. And, Norm didn't really know, but that comp is, I'm so, one of my favorite things I'm involved in.
I'm not surprised, because it not only does it reek of him and obviously his own personal taste, but then, like, you could tell on the other side, on the record label side, that care and focus was paid attention to it, just because it's like, there are very few things that you can kind of tell both parties are involved. Usually it's like, all right, well, yeah, the label put this out, but they didn't really give a shit. But like this you could tell, where it's like, no, this is intentional. This is deliberate. They both wanted to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think if I did that record would for never come out, wouldn't have had to follow the people of Norm, and he pulled stuff out that was like, wow, he got some gems on there. And I love the look of the record, because I love the look of the zine, more just with the aesthetic of it. And I thought I wanted to be really respectful for it. And, we got the right art direction, and it came together. It's great. I'm like, Norm, just put it out on Collect.
Dude, between that comp and then even though this was a glorified sampler, this was still huge for me, was the Revelation Records In-Flight compilation that came out in like 97 or something.
Yeah.
And it's like those, because obviously this is before the internet, where that was just basically a curated mixtape where it's like, oh yeah, here's some stuff. And then listening to it and just being like, oh dude, I love Garden Variety and I love Mouthpiece. Like, sure, of course.
Garden Variety. I love Garden Variety.
So, hey, I've got to interrupt the show for a minute to talk to you about Squarespace. And not just because I have to, but because I want to. This is a product I love. So I'm sure most of you experience this. Your parents, they may not be technologically savvy. So a while back, my stepfather, he owns a vet clinic. And he was like, hey, you know stuff about computers. Can you help me get a website? And I was like, you know what? I can. And in less than 20 minutes, I had a fully functional website for him for the business. Showed it to him. He was like, wow, when did you learn how to code? And I was like, just in my spare time and all that sort of stuff. I played it off because that's how amazing this website is. You don't need to have any coding experience necessary. You can dive right in and it looks professionally designed. No one will know unless you tell people that Squarespace helped you out from that perspective. But it's trusted by millions of people and businesses around the world, and it'll cost you $8 a month, which is ridiculous. That's like nothing, comparatively speaking, to the empire that you are going to be building after you launch the website. You get a free domain name if you sign up for a year. That's incredible. So here, seriously, drop listening to this podcast. Start your free trial site today with no credit card required. They're not requiring that. That means you can play around, see if it's for you, but I promise it will be. So go to squarespace.com. And when you decide to sign up for the service, because you'll be blown away by all this amazing stuff that they offer you, please use the code WORDS, WORDS, to get 10% off your first purchase. Seriously, there's no reason for you to not do something cool with your time and your life. Squarespace, build it beautiful. Now here we are, back to the show.
Yeah, I mean, we did another one like that. I got together with Jimmy Gestapo, and we did that Sunday Matinee.
Right.
Nothing was new, but it gave someone who just discovered hardcore what it was to kind of be, this is it. This is a representation of pretty much like a New York hardcore comp. And I thought that was great. We did some really interesting stuff. We did, like, Creepy Crawl was a big thing in New York, and we did a live record. And those are the days. I mean, now you could put one of those out, and you're lucky if you sell 1,000 copies. But those things were intriguing and awesome.
And so then, as you did you leave Profile to kind of directly into the sort of Triple Crown stuff, or was there something else that kind of bridged that gap?
No, I mean, Profile was in the process of being sold. I was going to stay on until the transition of it to basically I knew it was over. I tried to buy the Another Planet catalog, and I just realized, like, this is just crazy. I can't do this. So I decided to start something fresh because I knew that I was going to be consulting for a certain period of time, and I started it. Like I said, I'd been talking to Rick. I asked Rick to take that ride with me, and he said, yeah. And then A Stubborn All-Stars record was done, so I went and licensed that because Jeff was down for, he was ready to ride with me, and then the rest we were just going to figure out.
Right.
So I knew I had a little safety net in this consulting gig, and Smoke and Mirrors went to Caroline, sold them on this disc, I've got these records coming, and, got a advance and started it.
Sure.
And then the EP surprised everybody. I think we ended up selling like 25,000 copies of that, which for an EP is great, and did fairly well. And then it was time to roll up our sleeves and sign new things and go.
Sure. Was it, and you strike me as a person, I mean, granted, we've never spent a ton of time together, but you've always struck me as kind of a confident person, a person who, in some respect, obviously believed in whatever vision it was that you were trying to, build. Was it one of those things like when Triple Crown first started, were you confident, or were you just like, all right, dude, I'm gonna act like I know what I'm doing, and then hopefully other people following this, or like, was it a mixture of both?
It was a little mixture of both. I mean, at that point I'd already had one kid. When I told my wife I wanted to start the company, she said, literally, I called her. I said, I'm gonna do this. She's like, okay, we're having another kid. I'm awesome. Still doing it. Great news. Very excited. So, it was a little bit of, I'm going to do this. I think the only confidence I had was I had spent years making someone a lot of money in Profile Records, in running that company smartly. We ran a smart business, tried to be the artist advocate internally, and I feel like if I can do that for someone else, why can't I do this for myself? Yes, I'm in a totally different genre of music. Yeah, it's not going to be driven by radio. Success is not going to be that. So I think the best thing that I had going for me, like I said before, was I made mistakes on someone else's dime. So I certainly made a lot of mistakes when it was me, but I think some of the stuff that could cripple a company, I'd fuck up with it.
Right. You were able to minimize the damage because you'd already done it in the past.
Exactly. You got to learn from your mistakes. So yeah, we had good records, and it was off to the races.
Yeah,
as they say.
Right. As things started to build, and obviously, like you were, you were in hustle mode. Did I guess that the business aspect of just in general of not only running the label, but obviously everything you did with Profile. That in my opinion, that either kind of comes naturally to a person, or you learn it through doing. What camp do you fall in? Did it kind of come naturally to you, where you like, all right, I understand how to put these things together and how to do this, or was it a learned trait?
I think it was. I think the most important thing to bring to the record business, which a lot of people don't, is common sense. And I learned. I'd been in the business for a long time, so I kind of knew how the business worked. How it worked at that time, because I think that's an important thing to say, and applied my own thoughts to it. And, it just slowly with time, figured it out, because the one that's really important is even more now than then, because everything changes so fast, is you got to be flexible, and you got to roll with the changes, and you got to be willing to listen. Because I think that if you're just stuck in your way of doing business with it, and that's it, and this is the only way to do it, it's going to be a problem. So, I think it was always listening to other people. And that's another thing I like about a lot of these indie labels, and we've been around, there's a lot of us that have been doing this for 15, 20 years. There's competition, but I think that everybody's always willing to talk and the insight into their business. It's competitive when you're trying to sign something, but you're willing to have a conversation. So, and talk about, well, this is working for me, and this is what I do in this market, and you got to be just open to listen and learn and change.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because I definitely think especially when it's like you reach I wouldn't even say a certain level, but like when you've been, around, there's definitely that level of respect and, camaraderie that exists between labels, where it's like, oh yeah, like, what do you do for this? And then you're like, oh yeah, here's my t-shirt vendor or whatever. It's like because like you said, as long as your heart's in the right place, which hopefully in the independent record industry, you hopefully are there, because it's not like you're in it for the money, but you do have that cooperative spirit, because otherwise, yeah, you're just kind of, an island. And I find it so weird that there are independent labels that are successful, and they do kind of just like stick to who they know, and they don't, I guess, they don't intermingle with one another. I find it kind of weird.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, 100%. And, but I think there's a good community out there of people that kind of lean on each other. And, I'm definitely, like, I'm not a kid, so I'm, the cred stuff, I want to put out stuff that I think is credible, but like some of the stuff as far as the brand goes and the cred and it has to be this or that, I never get caught up in. I'm also a firm believer in things like A2IM and some of these indie trade organizations, because that helps you run a smart business. So I try to balance out some of that, like punk rock community and like the business community.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, you're coming at it from a unique perspective, where it's like and I think this is symptomatic of obviously the scene that you were raised in, is the fact that it's like, yeah, you can be successful and make money off of this thing, but you don't have to be, a dickbag. Like you can, because I think there's that weird, whatever people often refer to it as, punk rock guilt, where it's like, oh, I don't know, should I make money off this thing? It's like, yeah, you should be compensated for it. But as long as you're not doing it by stepping on 7 people in order to get it done, then you're okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the best advice I got, and I can't remember who told me this years ago, was like, don't be a dick. And I was like, that's it.
Right.
That's your whole career should be that.
Totally. It seems simple, but there are times where people get lost in that.
Exactly.
And so when did you feel that, Triple Crown started to, for lack of a better term, turn a corner, where you started to feel like, oh, wow, either people are paying attention to it from a press perspective, or sales really clicked on this thing, or, when did you start to feel, I guess maybe even breathe a sigh of relief, or have some sort of clarity where it's like, okay, I feel like I've set myself and my family off on this right path, just from a pure living perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely a couple of years in. We were treading water. I also had the luxury of my, I don't even know if it's a luxury, but my experience allowed me to kind of do some other consulting work while I was getting this thing going and doing. I did work for a couple of different labels, and it was definitely, we took the chance with Hot Rod Circuit, because at that point our biggest successes were all hardcore records. Whether it was Mushmouth, who had the best breakdowns in metalcore, to Scarhead. Hot Rod Circuit, I took a chance. I even put a buddy of mine's logo on it, because I was like, I got caught. I did something which I don't do anymore. I got so caught up in the, like, we're so successful over here, I can't put out this record. This is not making any sense. And I finally and I put a logo on that meant nothing to anybody, and because it gave me peace of mind. And we started having success in a totally different area, and I started to say, like, we weren't selling a ton of records, but that band opened up different doors for us. And I believe that the success we have with that band is what led us to Brand New. And then obviously with Brand New, that changed everything.
Sure. And because I remember at the time when Your Favorite Weapon, did that come out in 2000? 2001?
2001.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because at that time, that was like, it was right before I started working for Century Media. I was working at an independent record store in Southern California. And I just remember it's like, there are certain things that I would bring in because I was the main buyer. So there'd be certain things I would bring in where it's like, you know, I'm ordering 5 copies of this one thing. And then all of a sudden, you know, the next day I come to work and that's gone. And I'm like, oh, I'm ordering like 30 copies of that. Like, and that is 100% what it was for Brand New's first full length. I mean, I'm sure you weren't surprised because you obviously had that element of like, well, I have a confidence in this band, I'm signing them, there's a reason why I'm doing it. But were you surprised at just the I guess the rapid ascension of like, oh my gosh, like people are really identifying with this?
I definitely was. The only thing I think I was surprised with is how big it got on third record. I think we knew it was going to be something special. I remember getting the record back, and the record took forever to record from when we did the deal to when they actually turned it in. And I knew we had something because you could just feel it. And I remember going to the release show on Long Island, and it was like mayhem. It was mayhem with everybody singing every word in this like weird club. It was like a teen disco, and you just kind of said like, "Holy shit!" I was like, "Something is happening," and it just grew and grew, and you know, so it was great. It was really just it was a fun time. The band worked extremely hard. Those songs just connected. And you could see it when they played certain songs live that it was like, holy shit. And I remember, you know, we didn't even shoot the Jude Law video till like, I think 6 months after the record came out. Mm-hmm. You know, we just weren't doing like a lot of videos. I was like, guys, let's do this. We'll make you look bigger than you are, because they were playing Skate and Surf. And, you know, I remember the year before begging to have them on Skate and Surf, and they played like shitty thing. And then the next year they're on the main stage. So those to me were the signs of like, we are going in the right direction.
Sure. Was there a time before that, you know, because everyone always has those sort of like, you know, fork in the road, reflective moments of just like, oh, like this, maybe I should just, you know, for your sake, you know, maybe I should just stick to consulting. Maybe I should just do this. Were there any, you know, dark moments for you in that, in Triple Crown where you were just like, oh dude, I can't, like, this is a lot of work. I don't know if I should stick to this.
I don't think there's definitely moments of frustration and like fear of like, can I get through the next 6 months? Can I, you know, my background allowed me to look at like, you know, money coming in versus money going out to say like, hey, here's how we can make this work. Because I definitely don't want to be one of those companies that like, you know, gets a reputation. We don't pay, this guy doesn't pay his invoices. I think that's the worst thing in the world. So there were moments, I mean, I have a great support system, you know, in my wife, my family, and, you know, without that, we never could have, we wouldn't have made it. You know, that's the bottom line. And my wife was very understanding, and it helps that she works in the business also. But, you know, there was definitely times where it was like, what the fuck?
All right.
So, you know, but never like one moment where I just had to say, I can't do this. I mean, there are times you burn out just as naturally, but, you know. Yeah. And, you know, I think the biggest challenges came during the success of like, you know, 6-8 months into Brand New, where everybody was circling, trying to buy that contract. And at that time they had a manager whose only goal was to get them out of you. So that was just more frustrating, pain in the ass stuff. And, you know, I basically sat down with the guys and I said, this is a short contract. If you take this ride, you're going to write your own ticket. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, they saw, you know, when they were done with us, they went on to kind of lunatic deal. So, you know, and I think that's the honesty in the relationship with the band, because, you know, to this day we were all close, and, you know, I help them with some stuff, and, you know, they're good, they're great to us, and I just like them as people, and, you know, I love that they're kind of forging their own unique path.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I'm glad you brought up the idea of it's not so much the low points of where you're like, oh, how's my cash flow or whatever. But then once success and a light gets shined on you, that's when kind of, you know, the rubber hits the road and you're like, oh God, like, yeah, you know, the sharks start to circle. They want to buy the band out. You know, sometimes you can get pushed around where it's just like, oh no, I don't want to do this. And I think that is, sometimes people don't even consider that because obviously no one considers themselves like, oh yeah, I'm going to be successful. Like, and this is, I'll know that I have to handle this at some point. But then once it happens, you're just like, oh, so this is a thing I have to worry about. I didn't even consider this.
Yeah, exactly.
You said you have 2 kids now?
No, I have 3.
Okay, you have 3. And so, as you obviously being, attached to whatever youth, pop culture, what have you,
I know everything about Ariana Grande anybody wants to know.
Right. But so do your kids like have, an understanding of like, oh, like dad, runs a record label and he puts out stuff. Like, do they have, do they think it's cool or do they think it's lame?
No, my oldest is definitely, he plays, he's been in a bunch of bands and, it's not his music at all. Like the one band, he appreciates brand new because he just loves them people and he definitely appreciates it, but he loves Oh Brother. I mean, he's definitely leans towards the heavy thing. And, he's talked about a career in this and I'm like, oh, really?
Right.
So, my daughter and my youngest could care less.
Sure. Is it one of those things where I guess, maybe as a parent, does it make it easier for you to kind of navigate your, because how old, it's your son you're speaking about is the oldest?
Yeah.
How old is he?
He's 20. He's
okay.
Not, he's
so,
old.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, he's, but so is it easier to kind of, for you to identify like what he's getting into, like, whatever he's brought home in the past where you're just like, oh, okay, I either know that band or I know that musical genre. Does it make it easier to kind of, connect or navigate with him?
Yeah. I mean, definitely he went through a weird period of like really being into like Norwegian death metal, like the most extreme shit. And I was like, I love it that you love music. And none of this bothers me. I care that you listen to shitty music. That was it. Cause I mean, some of the stuff was so extreme. Like, listen, I love to seen some of the bands cause I'm just curious. We have this obsession with like Alcest and 1349 because I'm like, it's so over the top and dark and crazy. So I think he gets a kick out of that. And I'm like, how many of your friends parents and have this conversation with you?
Right.
And as he's grown up, his tastes have become a bit more diversified and intrigued. And I've always tried to expose him to music. The class I took him to see Jack play with Eric Clapton because he's a guitar player, and I'm like, you got to see this. And I'm like in awe, and I look over and he's sleeping.
Right.
I'm like, get up, you idiot. So it's fun. I mean, I'm sure I would have been the same idiot at that age if my dad ever thought to do that.
Right, totally. Yeah, check this out. It's like, dude, this could not be more uninteresting to me.
But the idea of taking him to Black Sabbath and meeting Dio after was like never in my wildest dreams as a little runt metalhead did I think I'd ever be there with my son. And that's kind of this, got an opportunity because of what I do to do that thing.
Right. Those surreal moments where it's like, this is strange. This is happening.
Yeah. And that to me is better than anything else.
Yeah, no, for sure. The last thing I want to hit on before I let you go was the, the notion that, I can almost guarantee that on more than one occasion, obviously you've been approached to, buy out and, buy into the label and like all of these certain business influences that have come from the outside. How have you, I guess, kind of handled them or examined them? Or is it a kind of a universal, like, well, I'd be interested, but I still need to be running the ship? And like, how have you kind of navigated those waters?
Well, I think definitely one thing is like, because we kind of have this eclectic mix and we have a solid business, we're the flavor of the month. We never kind of had that, outside of brand new, we've never had that. We'll have records that do very well in our world, can sell 50, 60,000 copies, which, as an indie label, that's great. You've got a band who's sold real records who are probably doing, 500 to 1,000 tickets a night, getting good festival looks. So never that label that's definitely going to be that thing that's got to be flipped at that moment. I think what we do is a little too weird. There's been, I think at the time you just look at everything. I'm certainly down for talking to anybody about that stuff, but I think the reason sometimes there's some hesitation is you sign these artists and they're signed because of me. So you don't want to leave them abandoned. So, and I don't think that any of those artists really are, the artists, like when we had success with plug-in stereo pop radio, we made a deal with Atlantic to move that over there. I think when it's right, if it's out of our league, we'll talk to somebody about something because, I'm always down for signing eclectic stuff, but I still think we have to offer value to it, and we have to figure out how can we grow its audience.
Right.
So, I'm optimistic. I think it's a good time for independent labels that know how to run a smart business. So, and it seems like everybody's getting sold. So I don't know. Maybe, who knows what that really means in the future.
I mean, I can't help but be, I guess, scared for any time I read a press release of a large independent label getting sold to, some nameless company. Well, just because it's like, I mean, you've had this experience just as much as I've seen it, where it's like, oh yeah, like, so they're just going to fire 70% of the staff, and then that's going to be it. And it's like, I can't help but be scared anytime I read those things, because I've seen it unfortunately happen to too many of my good friends, and I'm sure you've had the same experience.
Yeah, and it never makes sense to me, because I'm like, if they're doing a good job and you can offer them some support system, and they can be they were obviously a profitable company before, why not just let them kind of maintain and just give them a little support? So usually it's based on, a couple of artists, and they really want that artist. And, who knows? I mean, I went inside Warner Music for a couple of years to help start that independent label group. And my label was just distributed. And it was an interesting experience, and I learned a lot, and I think we had some success in there. But I always knew that at some point I was going to come back out and go full-time again with label. And, at least Warner's was good. They were really kind of, at least for what we tried to do, some of the upstreams definitely got mucked up. It was an interesting experiment. It should have been flawless and seamless, and they never were. It's definitely the old adage, there was too many cooks in the kitchen when it came down for upstreaming.
For sure. It's and especially when it's like, you can kind of see it before it happens. And then it's like, oh no, this isn't going to be good. And then, and then most of the time you're like, yeah, well, I guess that that instinct of mine told me that it wasn't going to be good. It actually came true. But
yeah, and on paper it should have been a lot more seamless and a lot smoother. And I think it can be, but it was really rare that I saw it work really, really smoothly. And there were certainly some bands that definitely got damaged by it. And then there was bands who got damaged but had really good teams around them that figured out how to make it work. And some of those guys still have careers to this day. But some of them, it just really crippled them.
Yeah, for sure. The last thing I wanted to hit you on was, honestly, one of the reasons why we're talking is because you emailed me about that piece that I wrote on Property of Zach, and obviously, it spoke to, still being engaged in music as you grow older and all that sort of stuff. And so, I wanted to give you an opportunity to, express yourself, because obviously, I mean,
I'm in my late 40s. We'll put it.
Yeah. We'll keep it cloudy, which is fine.
Yeah.
I'm
not a young man.
No, for sure. I mean, and I knew that, obviously, but the context where it's like, people such as yourself, obviously, like, I look up to, because it's like, well, yeah, like, there's a precedent of a person caring about music when they're 14, 15 years old, and carrying that for many, many years. I guess, what is it that you still obviously identify with in regards to not even it just being your profession, but just the fact that, like, you still care about music even though you've been so heavily involved in it?
Yeah, I mean, I still have that, like, spark where I still get excited hearing a band that takes me someplace that I'm like, holy shit. And and then there are bands where I may not 100% get it, but you can go see them live and understand that connection, and then you can say, yeah, I it totally, like, a light bulb goes off, and you can figure out how to work with it. And there's certain genres where I can't, some of that screamo, like, Rise stuff, couldn't distinguish one from the next. So that's not our world. I mean, I think that if we were going to jump on a scene and say we got to be in this, then I think that would be time for me to kind of take a step back. While it still is enjoyable and I'm happy with the brand, we'll keep doing it. But it's definitely, you definitely, like, you show up at some of these shows and you're just like, wow, I'm old.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's like, I think I made the joke before where it's just like, the moment that you turn 25, that's when you have that decision you have to make, where it's just like, well, like, I'm going to be that, I'm going to be 10 years older than some of these kids. And like, am I going to be comfortable with that? Or am I not going to be comfortable with that? Am I going to stop going to shows? And it's like, you got to make that decision at some point.
Yeah. I think the only time that gets weird is like you go to see a band that you're just, you've heard about and you want to check out. And, it's a hall show and you don't know the promoter. You just kind of show up and then you get the weird stares and stuff. And it's like, yeah, just here for carpool, don't mind me.
Totally. Yeah. Who's that old guy in the back? It's like, well, yeah, I'm here,
exactly.
I'm here to check out this show. It's like, sure you are, dude. Sure you are.
Yeah. So that's the only time that's definitely kind of weird. And then, there's some of these kids are, I'm signing or talking to, or, my kid's age. And that's always weird. But I also think it gives me a different perspective when I'm talking to them and really just trying to be very blunt about what's going on and, what's coming up. It's a very paternal kind of way of talking about things.
Yeah, no. And honestly, I think a lot of, kids in bands, they don't necessarily know they're looking for that, but when they have that, it's like, oh, that's great. It's like, yeah, there's a person who has been on the front lines for, longer than I've been alive. And that's a positive thing, as opposed to like, oh, this guy's so old and out of touch. It's like, well, no, that's not the case. Like, look at the records I've put out.
Yeah. And then they always, the challenge for them is to try to get me to hang out late at the bar. And I'm like, you really want to spend time at the bar? Come on. So
right.
That's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Sorry. You're like,
I think nothing would make Tiny Moving Parts happier than me shotgunning a beer, which I'm like, this is never going to happen.
Right. I don't think there's a better place to leave the last thought off than that. So
that image of me shotgunning a beer is wonderful. I know that for anybody that knows me.
Well, thank you so much, Fred. I really appreciate hanging out. And I hope it's been painless for you.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was great.
So that was Fred. Check out his record label, Triple Crown Records. Extremely consistent as far as the high quality of music that he is putting out. And it's just great to see a person like him still engaged and involved and ultimately caring, because that's the passion is the only thing that's going to keep us moving forward in this beautiful music scene we like to call home. So the producer, as always for the show, is Tom Richfield, who is back from tour. He's integrating himself back into real life, and hopefully that's not a hard transition. I don't have anything else to say. July, record label month. Enjoy it. Enjoy all the stuff I'm putting out, and hopefully your summer's going well. And if not, let's turn it around. Let's make it happy. Hopefully this podcast will push it in the right direction. Until next week, be safe, everybody.